Okay, let's dive right into this. If you follow the markets, you're constantly hearing acronyms like GDP or gross national income tossed around as the ultimate benchmarks of success. But today, our explainer is zeroing in on a really foundational question. Why are national income statistics gathered in the first place? We know what the letters stand for, sure, but understanding the actual mechanics, the strategic logic behind why we collect this data on such a massive scale, that's what really gives us clarity on how the global economy ticks. We're going to break down the sheer scope of this undertaking and figure out exactly why this data forms the absolute bedrock of modern economic strategy. To really frame this up, we have to look at it as a giant cost-benefit problem. Compiling national income data is extremely complicated, and it is incredibly expensive. Think about it. We're talking about surveying tens of thousands of businesses, tracking massive international import and export manifests, and filtering out a literal ocean of statistical noise. Getting the financial pulse of an entire nation takes serious bureaucratic muscle and relentless auditing. So the question is straightforward. If the logistical headache and the financial cost are just overwhelmingly high, why do we do it? What's the return on investment that makes every single nation on Earth prioritize this? Well, the source material we're analyzing today actually breaks down the exact logic behind this global effort. By digging into the specific framework together, we can get past the surface-level numbers and really see how these dense economic principles dictate how governments and institutions operate in the real world. We're going to decode this, looking at the organizations required to pull it off, the immediate macro-level payoffs, and how this data eventually trickles down to shape your actual day-to-day life. So let's start with the architecture of how this is all collected in Part 1, the big lift, global organizations and rules. It turns out, every single country has an organization specifically responsible for calculating and reporting its national accounts, like the Bureau of Economic Analysis in the US or the Office for National Statistics in the UK. But guys, this isn't just about managing a few giant spreadsheets. The real challenge is harmonizing crazy diverse economic activities. These organizations have to capture highly digitized transactions in Western markets while simultaneously figuring out how to measure heavily cash-based, informal shadow economies elsewhere. They have to mash up census data, tax records, and corporate filings into one continuous, reliable data stream. It's a massive 24/7 logistical undertaking in every single nation. Now, for all that data to actually be useful globally, everybody has to play by the same rules. That's where the United Nations comes in, with the System of National Accounts, or the SNA. Basically, these are the internationally agreed-upon guidelines for calculating and reporting economic activity. It gives everyone the exact same definitions for complex stuff like capital consumption or how to value a government service. The SNA ensures that when you compare Germany's economic output to Brazil's, you're functionally comparing apples to apples. Without this rulebook, cross-border trade agreements or international lending would be practically impossible to get right. Okay, so we've got this vast, unstandardized infrastructure pumping out data. What's the point? Let's move to Section 2, the immediate payoff, the ultimate report card. I love how the source frames this. It calls these statistics a report card for countries. It's the ultimate definitive measure of a nation's economic growth and stability. But what exactly are we grading here? Well, this report card evaluates productivity, it shows whether specific industries are expanding or shrinking, and it tests overall economic resilience. By tracking GDP alongside things like gross national income, analysts can figure out if an economy is genuinely thriving on its own domestic production or if it's kind of just treading water by relying on foreign direct investment. It is literally the core diagnostic tool for global macroeconomic health. And because it gives us such a sharp diagnostic picture, this report card is used directly to develop actual government policies. It's the absolute bedrock for fiscal and monetary strategy. On the fiscal side, governments use these statistics to figure out tax rates, model what a new infrastructure project will do, and figure out social spending. On the monetary side, central banks look at this exact data to set interest rates, target inflation, and manage quantitative easing. Plus, on an international level, a country's debt-to-GDP ratio, which is entirely based on these stats, dictates its sovereign credit rating and whether it can even borrow money in global bond markets. Simply put, this data runs the show. But governments aren't the only ones obsessed with this data. Let's shift gears to Section 3, Forecasting the Future, Economists versus Businesses. Now, what's really interesting here is the contrast and how different groups actually use this information. On one hand, you have economists.
They use this data to develop really complex models and forecasts about the broader future. They're trying to predict systemic stuff, yield curves, long-term employment shifts, that sort of thing. But on the other hand, you have businesses. They take these exact same data sets and use them to make highly practical forecasts about future consumer demand. National income data directly tells a corporation whether they should stock up on inventory, expand into a new market, or maybe put a freeze on hiring. It's wild that the exact same raw data feeds the theoretical models of academic economists and the immediate, on-the-ground decisions of global businesses.
All right, we've talked about governments, economists, and corporations, but let's bring this down to ground level in our final section, the human element, measuring quality of life. Our source highlights 3 massive everyday uses for this data. First, we use it to analyze performance over time, so we can actually see if past economic policies worked or failed. Second, to compare different countries. Knowing where a nation stands is super important because it drives where international investments go, shapes foreign aid, and even heavily influences global migration. I mean, people and capital tend to flow toward places with strong income growth, right? And finally, we use these statistics to evaluate the standard of living. This takes all those giant institutional numbers and refocuses them on the actual well-being of the everyday population. Basically, rising national incomes act as the baseline basis for the quality of life in a country. This is the ultimate cause and effect link. We track all this crazy macroeconomic data because a country's per capita income correlates almost perfectly with its citizens' ability to get advanced healthcare, go to college, and use modern infrastructure. It's the financial engine that funds the social safety net. At the end of the day, this whole massive, expensive apparatus of national income statistics really just exists to measure human development and societal progress. So, we started by looking at this wildly expensive, logistically dense data collection system, and we've traced it all the way from UN frameworks down to your local standard of living. The data they gather shapes the fiscal policies you live under, the strategies of the businesses you buy from, and the fundamental quality of life in your region. So I'll leave you with this. Based on your own country's recent economic report card, how might these statistics and the policies driven by them be impacting your personal quality of life right now? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning.